They told him the 13th floor didn't exist. The elevator skipped it. The stairwell locked it. But one night, when the lights went low and curiosity beat fear, he found it. Rows of mannequins, silent, waiting, and they didn't like being watched. My name's the Tales Keeper, and this is Nightmare for Giggles. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next story. Tonight we head into an old department store, one with a floor that isn't supposed to exist. A worker breaks the rule, unlocks the wrong door, and finds something waiting. This is the Mannequins of Floor 13. Let us begin, shall we? Daniel had worked at Halpern's department store for 6 months, long enough to know the rhythms. Mondays were slow. Thursdays, the pension crowd came in. Sundays, the kids ran wild in the toy aisles while their parents pretended not to care. He also knew the rules. Floor 13 wasn't real. The elevators went from 12 to 14. The stairwell door at 13 was bolted, chained, padlocked. Managers joked about it. Bad luck floor. But nobody explained. That night, Daniel stayed late to restock. His shift ended at 9, but his manager left him with a ring of keys and the words, "Lock up when you're done." The ring clinked heavy in his pocket as he walked the stairwell, checking each door. 12, locked. 14, locked. Then his hand brushed the 13th. The knob rattled. The chain was gone. He froze, staring at the small brass number on the door. 13. One of the keys slid smooth into the padlock. He should have left it. He should have walked away. But curiosity is its own master. The lock snapped open with a click that sounded too loud in the empty stairwell. The door groaned when he pushed it, air rushing past him like the floor had been sealed too long. It smelled stale, dust, and old perfume. His flashlight beam swept across tiled floor, peeling wallpaper. A long hallway lined with display windows. The mannequins inside wore outdated clothes, coats with shoulder pads, hats that belonged to another decade. Dust coated everything, but it looked staged, like a showroom frozen in time. The silence was deep, the kind that makes you check if your own breathing is too loud. Daniel stepped inside, the lock heavy in his pocket. The air settled around him, thick and unmoving. He told himself it was just storage, just a forgotten floor. But as he walked past the first row of glass, something felt wrong. The mannequins didn't stand like mannequins. Their hands bent too close to real, their heads tilted as if listening. He laughed under his breath. "Creepy," he whispered, just to hear a voice. His own words didn't come back as an echo. They came back warped, like someone else repeating them a half-second late. The hallway opened into a wide room, a floor once meant for display. Dozens of mannequins stood in neat rows, dressed in faded fashion. Some wore gowns, yellowed with age. Others stood bare, plastic skin cracked at the joints. Daniel's flashlight flickered across them. Their eyes, if you could call the smooth indentations that caught the light in ways that suggested depth where there was none. He circled one in a tattered suit. Its hand was raised, pointing slightly, though the finger seemed too long for plastic. He leaned closer, half amused, half unnerved. When he turned to walk away, he felt it, that tug in the air, that sense of being followed. He spun around. The mannequin's hand was down by its side. He swore it had been pointing. Daniel laughed it off, nerves pretending to be humor. He shook his head and kept walking. But the mannequins seemed closer now, the space between them tighter. He lifted his phone, snapping a quick picture. The flash lit the room white. For an instant, the mannequins all looked as if they were leaning forward, closer to him, like a crowd pressing in. On the screen, their positions looked normal again. He checked the photo twice. Normal. But when he lowered the phone, one mannequin now faced him directly. Its head turned. Daniel's stomach dropped. He hadn't heard it move. He took a step back. The mannequin didn't follow. It just stood, grinless, eyeless, yet somehow watching. The quiet pressed harder, like a weight. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, trying to shake it. He told himself he was being paranoid, that shadows and nerves played tricks. Then he heard it. A whisper. Not words, just the soft brush of fabric like clothes shifting against one another. He whipped his flashlight toward the mannequins. Rows of still bodies stared back. Dust floated, disturbed. "Hello?" His voice cracked in the air. Nothing answered. But when he turned to head back to the stairwell, the mannequins weren't in neat rows anymore. They had shifted, subtly, almost politely, forming a narrow aisle that led deeper into the floor. And for reasons he couldn't name, Daniel followed. The mannequins had parted just enough for Daniel to walk between them, a path too deliberate to be an accident. His flashlight beam jittered with every step, the light bouncing across blank faces, bent arms, cracked torsos. He kept telling himself it was a trick of perspective, that someone had set this up years ago for storage, maybe even as a joke. But the way they leaned in toward the aisle made him feel like the guest of honor at a show that hadn't started yet. As he passed the 10th mannequin, something brushed his sleeve. He froze, heart hammering. The mannequin beside him had its hand stretched outward, just enough to graze fabric. He yanked away. The fingers stayed outstretched. Dust shook from the plastic, falling like gray snow. Daniel didn't run, not yet, but his body screamed at him to leave. The aisle ended at a display wall covered in mirrors, the kind department stores use to make spaces feel bigger. The glass was smeared and cracked, but enough remained to reflect the rows behind him. Daniel lifted his light. His reflection looked pale, scared. That was expected. What wasn't expected was the mannequins. In the mirror, they weren't standing still. They leaned forward, bent at the waist, arms reaching. Dozens of them. Frozen mid-step, caught like predators in headlights. Daniel spun around. Behind him, the mannequins stood perfectly still. Dust settled peacefully on their shoulders. He turned back to the mirror. In the reflection, one of them was right behind him, hand almost touching his shoulder. Daniel staggered forward, smashing into the glass. It cracked with a sharp pop, spiderweb lines cutting across his reflection. When he looked again, the mannequin was gone. His flashlight flickered. Panic gnawed at his chest now. He stumbled back through the rows, searching for the stairwell. Instead, he found a chair. An old office chair sat in the middle of the room, worn leather split, metal legs rusted. A mannequin sat in it, dressed in a faded manager's suit, hands folded neatly in its lap. Its head tilted upward, as if waiting for him to speak. Daniel swallowed. "What is this?" His voice cracked. The mannequin said nothing, of course, but the air grew heavier, like the silence itself was answering him. He edged closer. A name tag, dusty and cracked, clung to the lapel. Mr. Halpern. Daniel blinked. The founder of the store. Dead for 30 years. The mannequin's head tilted further, a sharp jerk that popped its neck joint. Dust spilled from its collar. Daniel stumbled back, tripping over his own feet. The mannequins around the chair had closed in. He scrambled up, flashlight beam slicing wildly. The mannequins were no longer in rows. They had formed a circle around him, shoulders pressed close, faceless heads leaning in. Daniel spun, breath shallow, panic rising. The circle wasn't solid. A narrow gap remained, a doorway. An invitation. The whispers started again. Fabric brushing fabric, limbs adjusting, the tiniest scrape of plastic feet against tile. Daniel couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed, "Don't go deeper." But his legs moved anyway, carrying him through the gap. As he passed, one mannequin turned its head to follow him. The motion was smooth. Too smooth. He ran. That wasn't the narrow passage spat him out into another room. This one was darker, the air thicker, harder to breathe. His flashlight beam caught old signage leaning against the walls. Sale, clearance, new season. The words looked strange, like they didn't belong to language anymore. At the far end, he saw a door. Relief swelled in his chest. An exit. He sprinted. But the closer he got, the taller it looked, stretching, warping. His flashlight flickered, and when it came back, the door was gone. Only mannequins stood there now, arms outstretched, waiting to catch him. Daniel backed away from the wall of mannequins, chest heaving. His flashlight beam shook so badly the shadows danced with every breath. Then came the sound. Not whispers this time, not fabric. Footsteps, slow, heavy, one after another. They echoed through the dark room, though nothing was moving. The mannequins stood still, arms out, frozen in their reaching. Daniel pressed his back to the wall, heart thundering. The footsteps circled him, too steady to be his imagination. One step behind him, another to the side. He whipped the light around. Nothing. Just blank faces staring. Then he saw it. The mannequins' feet. They weren't where they had been. Each step had carried them inches closer. Daniel bolted, crashing through the circle, shoving cold limbs aside. He stumbled into another hallway lined with more displays. The mannequins posed as if mid-shopping. Some held fake purses. Others pushed empty carts, dust crusting their plastic knuckles. The air shifted. A voice broke the silence. "Back to work." Daniel froze. The voice was rough, old, like it had clawed its way through a broken intercom. He spun, light slicing the dark. No one. Only mannequins. "Back to work," the voice repeated. It was coming from the mannequin in the manager's suit, the one he'd seen sitting in the chair. Only now it stood at the end of the aisle, arms crossed like a man disappointed in his employee. Daniel stumbled back, choking on air. The mannequin's jaw didn't move, but the words were clear. "Back to work." A sharp ding echoed down the hall. Daniel whipped his head around. The sound came from the far end, where an old elevator sat hidden behind a row of mannequins. Its doors were rusted, the panel cracked, but the light above flickered. 13. The bell dinged again. The mannequins turned their heads toward it in unison. Daniel's stomach dropped. Their necks creaked, joints grinding. 100 faceless heads, all tilting towards the elevator, listening. The bell dinged a third time. The doors rattled. Something inside pounded once against the metal. Daniel ran. He burst into the largest room yet. A wide open space that must have once been a showroom. The ceiling stretched high, chandeliers hanging dead with dust. Display racks stood toppled. Broken mannequins lay scattered across the tiles, arms and legs torn free. For a moment, he thought he was safe. Then the broken mannequins twitched. One arm dragged itself across the floor. A head rolled and then stopped, tilting as if looking at him. From the shadows, more mannequins shuffled forward. Whole ones, cracked ones, pieced together. They formed a loose half-circle, corralling him into the center. Daniel spun in every direction. The mannequins closed in, one step at a time. Their movements weren't random now. They were organized, practiced. The whispers returned, layering over each other until they sounded almost like words. At the far end of the showroom, a massive velvet curtain hung from ceiling to floor. It didn't belong. It looked too clean, too deliberate, untouched by dust. The mannequins stopped their advance, leaving Daniel just enough space to move forward. He realized sickly that they were guiding him, herding him like cattle. His legs carried him toward the curtain. His hands trembled as he reached out and grabbed the fabric. It felt warm. Too warm. He pulled. The curtain slid open. Behind it wasn't a wall. It was another room, a stage. And on the stage sat dozens of mannequins arranged like an audience, all facing the curtain, all facing him. In the center stood a spotlight, flickering to life. It shone down on him. The light pinned Daniel like a bug. His shadow stretched long across the tiles, reaching into the mannequin audience. They sat in neat rows, suits, dresses, tattered gowns, their faceless heads all tilted toward him. The whispers rose again, louder now. Fabric against fabric, plastic feet scraping tile. Together it almost formed words, though not ones he knew. Daniel raised a hand against the glare. "I don't belong here," he muttered. The mannequins didn't move, but the air felt thick with attention, like hundreds of unseen eyes staring through their blank faces. Then, slowly, the mannequins in the front row stood, not all at once, one by one, as if a play had begun, and Daniel was the only actor. He staggered back, but the mannequins behind him shifted, blocking his retreat. They pressed him forward into the light. The spotlight buzzed overhead. He realized it wasn't powered by electricity. It pulsed, almost alive, humming with some old energy the building shouldn't have. The mannequins in the front row lifted their arms, jerky, stiff, together, like applause in slow motion. The sound made bile rise in Daniel's throat, plastic clapping against plastic. The manager mannequin appeared again, stepping out from the side curtain. Its suit hung stiff, its name tag crooked. It raised one arm, gesturing toward Daniel like a host presenting the show's star. The whispers swelled. "Work," they seemed to chant. "Work. Work." Daniel bolted. He ducked past the spotlight, shoving between mannequins in the second row. Their limbs snapped as he tore through, cold hands brushing his shoulders. The whispers turned to screeches, plastic joints twisting, torsos grinding against each other as the mannequins lurched to stop him. He sprinted across the room and spotted a stairwell door. A real exit this time. The number 13 glowed faintly above it. He shoved the bar. It opened. The stairwell stretched down into darkness. He didn't think. He ran. His footsteps echoed, frantic, bouncing off the walls. The door slammed behind him, muffling the whispers. For a moment, relief filled his chest. Then he noticed the numbers. Each landing read the same. 13th floor, 13th. Again and again, no matter how far down he went. He stopped at the next landing, chest heaving, sweat soaking his shirt. The silence pressed in again. Then came the scrape. From below, slow, heavy, something climbing the stairs. Daniel's flashlight beam wavered. The sound drew closer, step by deliberate step. He turned and bolted back up, only to find the mannequins waiting at the top of the stairwell. Rows of them, frozen mid-step. He froze too, caught in their rhythm. For a terrible moment, no one moved. Not him. Not them. The air felt thick enough to choke. Then, in unison, all their heads turned toward him. Daniel screamed, throwing himself sideways through the stairwell door. He stumbled out into bright light. The smell of new carpet, fresh paint, shiny racks of clothes, Halpern's department store. Daylight poured through the windows. Shoppers bustled past, carrying bags. Music played faintly from overhead speakers. He looked around, dazed, heart pounding. He almost laughed. Had it been a dream? Then he froze. The shoppers' movements weren't right. Too stiff. Too synchronized. One by one, they turned toward him. Not faces. Smooth plastic. Blank heads. Rows of mannequins disguised as people, all tilting their heads in the same rhythm. The overhead speakers crackled to life. "Attention, shoppers," the manager's voice rasped. "Floor 13 is now open." The lights dimmed. The whispers returned. And Daniel realized the show was only beginning. Some doors aren't meant to be unlocked. Some floors are kept closed for a reason. And if you ever find yourself in an old department store that skips the 13th floor, don't go looking for it, because the mannequins are still waiting. Until next time, this was Nightmare for Giggles.